They are now reporting why Kamala Harris lost Georgia, which I think we tried to tell you guys, but they're now finally admitting it. A couple of you sent this article to me. You guys got to see this. Democrats' Georgia losses linked to Black voters staying home. What did we tell you? What did we tell you? Black people stayed home. I don't know how else to say it, right? Like all these excuses of misogyny, of racism. And again, not to say there's none of that. There is some of that. But the reality is Black people stayed home. Miss Mississippi, I live in Metro Atlanta and I stayed home. What'd I tell you? Stayed home. So as I've continued to say, Kamala Harris lost the Black vote. Let's get into it. Hey, 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 hey. Here it is. There's her and there's Trump. I'll make it a little bit bigger so you guys can read along with me. In the Peach State, almost all demographics had an increase in turnout from the 2020 election. Almost all, ladies and gentlemen. Only Black voters decreased in turnout. So out of every demographic group in Georgia, it was only Black voters that had a decrease. So the whole people didn't support her because of her race doesn't apply in Georgia. Let's continue. This is what they don't want you to know. They got to admit it now. As a share of citizen voting age population, Black voters were the only demographic with a decline in turnouts. Bah, bah, bah. If Black turnout instead went up by 1.9 percentage points, like white turnout did, that would mean that 103,000 additional Black voters in 2024 would have gone to that, right? So it said Trump won the state by 115,095 votes. That's not to assume that all would vote for Harris. Still, the numbers are intriguing. In 2020, President Joe Biden had a 60.2% turnout of the Black vote. In 2024, that dropped to 58.3% for Harris. What people have to understand is that 2%, 3%, 1% drop off of the Black vote can cost you the election if you're a Democrat presidential candidate. You really can't afford to lose us. That's why Obama knew this. That's why Obama said, problem is you brothers. You really can't afford to lose us. But the Democrats, they need to know that you ain't got it with us like that anymore. You don't have us wrapped around your finger anymore. The orange man bad and he's going to eat you and deport you. And even if you're an American citizen, he's going to kick you out of the country. Doesn't work anymore. Hillary Clinton received a larger percentage of the Black vote than Kamala Harris, and even Hillary Clinton lost. The Black vote has continued to decline since Barack Obama. It goes on to say, Dr. Alvin Tillery, who's a Democratic strategist, pollster, and professor at Northwestern. This is what he goes on to say here, is that he doesn't believe it was a problem with Harris as a candidate, but a messaging problem from the party. See, here we go with the messaging. It's a messaging problem. It has nothing to do with economics. Democrats ran a very undifferentiated campaign from Republicans. They gave her a Herculean task. Harris did everything asked of her. And that's a big part of the problem. You did everything asked of you. You didn't stand out on your own. You didn't separate yourself from Joe Biden. The economy was trash. You didn't want to accept the reality of that. Everything that was asked of her, and that's why she lost. He also pointed to a general shift among young Black voters. There is generational change happening in the Black community where the millennial and the Gen Z Black voters are less committed to the Democratic Party. Say it again, fam. There is generational change happening in the Black community where the millennial and the Gen Z Black voters are less committed to the Democratic Party. Why would that be, folks? Simple economics. We went over the economics in the Morning Joe video. Millennials and Gen Z, we are very much affected. We've been affected by the housing crisis. Then we have to go to the pandemic. We have been very much impacted. And the Democratic Party hasn't done anything for us. Time to change. A lot of people, those turned out for the first time in 2020 to vote for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. But then they spent the entire 4 years being told their legislative priorities couldn't get done by the Democrats. And they never planned on getting it done. People run on things they think you want to hear just so you'll come out and vote for them. That doesn't mean they actually plan on accomplishing these things. Would be interesting if they did, but that isn't what it means. This was a major concern for the Harris campaign going into the election. Experts began warning that her support among minority groups was waning. So did everybody hear this? Going into the election, they already knew. They been knew. This was not just a problem for Democrats in Georgia. According to the exit polls, minority voters played a role in Trump's win across the nation. He swept the 7 consensus battleground states, racking up a 93-0 edge in the Electoral College. In 2020, 87% of Blacks nationally supported Biden, while in 2024, Harris garnered 85% support. What did I tell you about you can't afford to lose even 2% of us if you want to win? Not as a Democrat. You can't. If they had hyper-mobilized Black turnout and it wasn't down 2 to 3% nationally, they would have won the election. The Democrats' message just really wasn't landing on these younger Black voters, and they were the ones that stayed home. Now, another reason why young Black voters stayed home, and that was because of Gaza. Number 1, economy. Number 2 was Gaza. Ask them. So this is why you can't, and I continue, I warned people. It says the Democratic Party is divided. I really think that they're going to try to run an even more center-right campaign the next time, and they're going to lose again. Then the party is going to be facing decomposition. So if you're just joining, Democrats are now saying that Georgia losses are linked to Black voters staying home. And guys, they knew this. Corporate media knew this. This is why they were trying to tell you that the reason for the loss was misogyny and racism. And again, like I said, yes, there is some of that, but that's not all of it, because they did not want to admit that Black people stayed home. Simone Sanders doesn't want to admit that Black people didn't show up to vote for her. CNN, like all of them, Joe Scarborough, Anderson Cooper, Abby Phillips, they don't want to say publicly that Kamala Harris lost the Black vote. Because with Hillary, you couldn't even say that because Hillary received more of the Black vote than Kamala did. But she lost it. Looks pretty bad when you've been telling everybody we could have the first Black woman president and that person loses the Black vote. Black people weren't falling for this, especially younger Black people. I told you. Now, there were signs, because this is what they didn't tell you. Even before Election Day, they knew low turnout of Black voters during early voting in Georgia. See, this is the information. This is local news, local Georgia news. Hello. This is the information that Abby Phillips and Dana Bash and Jake Tapper didn't want you to hear. In fact, they said the opposite. Remember, CNN was telling you, look, we're seeing record voting turnout for early voting in Georgia. This is great. These people were lying. The information showed the opposite. Low turnout. That's a big sign. If the turnout was low for early voting for Black voters in Georgia, that was a big sign that it was not moving in Kamala Harris's favor. However, corporate media allowed you to believe that it was. So we need to ask a question. Remember back in the day, 2020, when Stacey Abrams, former gubernatorial candidate, spent all her time and energy into mobilizing Black people to register to vote? She was able to get a lot of people to register to vote. What happened to those people? Here's a little flashback. Just a reminder what happened in Georgia in 2020.
For Sashida McNair, a Democratic victory was a long time coming.
This is a great celebratory moment for all of us, for people of color, for people who waited hours on end.
She was one of them.
You've been here about 3 hours. I'm not leaving.
From primary day to the general election.
Was it worth it? Absolutely worth it. Every bit of it.
It was experiences like hers that motivated Stacey Abrams.
So you see the woman who was sitting there in the rain with her baby for hours to vote? What happened to those people?
To ramp up the battle she had been fighting for years.
I grew up in a family that believed in voting rights. My dad was arrested at the age of 14 for registering Black people to vote during Jim Crow. You know, fighting for the right to vote is in my bones. But what is different for me is that instead of fighting to expand the right as I did as a college student, as a young person, I'm fighting to defend that right. And my hope is that in the next few iterations of Congress, we can finally actually stop the fight to protect the right to vote and return to the goal of just expanding those who believe their access is real. Because I know that voting is how we get the change we need.
A graduate of Spelman College, Abrams served as Atlanta's deputy attorney at age 29. By 2011, Democratic leader in the Georgia General Assembly, the first woman in state history to lead either party. But it was her hard-fought gubernatorial race in 2018 that made her a national name in politics.
This is not a speech of concession, because concession means to acknowledge an action is right, true, or proper. As a woman of conscience and faith, I cannot concede that.
See, people forget this, right? A number of times as people will point to, again, Trump not willing to concede. People forget that Stacey Abrams didn't want to concede either. I remember this. She ran against Brian Kemp twice and she lost twice.
But my assessment is the law currently allows no further viable remedy, because the title of governor isn't nearly as important as our shared title, voters. And that is why we fight on.
What was it about that campaign, specifically about the way that it ended, that really turned up this fire in you?
The reality is, I had time. When I did not become governor, I had a compulsion which told me that if I was telling the truth when I ran for office, that the work did not end when I did not get the job. The work still had to be done, and the work became even more urgent.
After losing her own gubernatorial race in 2018 by 55,000 votes, Abrams founded her group Fair Fight and helped lead the registration of 800,000 new voters.
Pause. Now, everyone take a look at that number, 800,000 new voters. I told you she registered a lot of people. What happened to all those people, right? So the Black vote declined in Georgia in 2024. So out of the 800,000 new registered voters that Stacey Abrams was able to, get moving into action, come out and support Joe. What happened to those people? A lot of those people stayed home. So this is something to point towards. It wasn't that people weren't registering to vote. Why did those people, that the 800,000 newbies, why did they feel empowered and enthusiastic to come out and vote in 2020, but not in 2024? What happened to the $2,000 checks that Biden promised Black people at HBCUs when he gave that speech in Georgia? If you put Warnock and Ossoff into the Senate, I'll make sure you get those $2,000 checks. Everybody remember this? What happened to all those people? How do you lose those people? You lose them by not having strong economic policies that will benefit the working class. You lose them by not being willing to listen to younger Black voters when they were confronting you about foreign policy decisions like a genocide in Gaza. You lose them by lying to these kids at the HBCUs and telling them you're going to forgive all the student loan debt for HBCU grads if they make under $125,000 a year. Say what you want about the people, but some of us don't forget. And we remember some of the promises that were made. So all those people did not return to vote for Kamala in 2024. And the numbers were showing prior to Kamala, when Biden was still in the race, he was not going to win Georgia either. So that administration needs to take responsibility for that.
What is it about your approach that's so different?
We started working on this initiative in 2010 after we lost every statewide elective office for Democrats. It wasn't enough to register voters. We had a singular focus on registration and engagement. It's like giving someone the keys to a car, but never teaching them how to drive. We built a ground game that absolutely combined those two pieces. We did go to voters who had never been contacted. We went to communities that had never seen a politician.
Many of those new voters, Black voters. This year they came out in record numbers. Statewide turnout was up more than 20% from 2016.
Statewide turnout was up 20% from 2016. Again, Black people stayed home.
Than 200,000 extra voters in just 3 counties in metro Atlanta. And according to exit polls, an overwhelming number of Black voters in the state, 88%, backed Biden.
What was it about this election that had so many African-American voters turning out specifically in support of Joe Biden?
Our survival was on the ballot. And we know that Joe Biden was the only candidate who saw us and who believed that Black communities deserved real opportunity, not the postcards and the sloganeering of Trump, but real solid plans. And the racial equity plank of Joe Biden's plan resonated with communities. But this was also a question of justice. Access to justice and the racial reckoning that has been sweeping our nation did not disappear in November. And you saw in particular young Black people coming out saying, I'm going to protest in the streets, but I'm also going to protest at the ballot box, because that's
okay. So we go back to the George Floyd protests. Young people said protest in the streets, but I'm going to protest at the ballot box. So I would say this time around, the opposite happened, where there were young people in the streets, young Black people in the streets protesting for Gaza, who decided not to show up at the ballot box. And all these years, you know, they talk about the younger voters as, oh, we don't really need them. We just need the voters that are 65 and older. And now you realize over the past couple of years, you do need some of these young voters, especially some of the young Black ones.
That's the only way to make the changes we demand real.
What would Black voters want to see from a Biden presidency?
I think first and foremost, it's access to health care. We know that COVID-19 has had a disproportionate
access to health care. And we'll stop it there, because that was another thing. Wasn't Biden supposed to expand Obamacare? Never happened. Never happened. Now, I just showed you that information. Listen to what Joy Reid and this dude that she brought on there. I've seen this guy everywhere. Listen to what he said. They're saying, well, there was someone on the inside that was sabotaging Kamala's campaign. Listen to this and then think about what I just told you.
And you want to talk about something that I really want to get into, and that is the consultants. Talk about the consultant factor in this election.
Yeah, you know, there's a lot of reasons why Kamala lost. One of them that when I spoke to elite Democratic people, and they kept bringing up the name Jen O'Malley Dillon. Jen was the campaign chair for Kamala Harris, and she had been hired to do that for Biden. So this is a Biden person, a Biden loyalist, who in 2023 was leaking to media that Kamala should be replaced on the ticket, right? This is the reporting that I have on my Substack. So this is the person you have to go to battle with, who a year earlier was whispering to reporters saying, maybe you should be replaced. And part of the thing with Jen, too, when you talk about the consulting class, that she has an ad buying company. So when she's advising the candidate saying you should buy ads, that is personally enriching to her. Right now, that doesn't mean that she's doing anything nefarious, right? She seems to have done her job as best as she could. But when a hammer sees everything as a nail, and when you personally are enriched by ad buys, then you're going to recommend that to the candidate, as opposed to Donald Trump got a lot out of being on podcasts, right? And we don't feel like Kamala took advantage of that as much.
Cry me a river. The average voter has no idea who Jen is. The average voter, a lot of them didn't even see these ads that he's talking about. And then also the average person probably does not even really care. Okay. They're coming up with all kinds of excuses other than what I just showed you. She lost the black vote. I can go to black voters right now and ask them, were you influenced by your vote based on any of these ads that you saw with Kamala? No, I was influenced by my wallet. Nah, I was influenced by my bank account. I was influenced by these grocery store prices. I was influenced by her not having a black agenda. I was influenced by her not having an agenda for working class people. I was influenced by the policies with the border. I was influenced by the migrant crisis coming into my city and the people not having a handle on the situation. I was influenced by economics. The average person this has nothing to do with why she lost. They want to tell you everything other than what I just told you. She lost the black vote. Black people in particular under the age of 65 weren't feeling you. And no Divine Nine, no AKA, no Roland Martin, no Steve Harvey could save you from that. You can trot out every type of celebrity that you want. But we saw the writing on the wall. We weren't feeling you. How you get less of the black vote than Hillary Clinton? Explain it to me. None of that. None of it. What makes it worse? Why is she still asking for money? Why you got your hand out when the campaign is over and you still asking people for money? Harris raised more than $1 billion in her loss to Trump and is still asking donors for more money. You go onto the website right now. They're still saying, donate. We're still in this fight. Fight your ass off the screen. Fight yourself all the way back to Oakland, Berkeley, whichever one you're supposed to be from. And you stay there and you sit there. Fight yourself there. How you collecting money from people when your campaign is in debt sounds like to me you trying to get money to pay off that debt. Give me money, give me money. Fight that. Go fight that. This woman was always a clown from day one. And to make it worse, she is actually considering running for president again. A woman who lost the black vote is considering running for president again in 2028. I cannot kid you not. This comes from Politico. Harris is telling her advisors and allies to keep her political options open. She could run again for president or California governor. That means Cackles could be back. They don't quit. They don't give up. She still want to come back and fight. Let her run and let her lose again. What are you going to come back with this time? You're going to switch your position on fracking again? All of a sudden, you're going to pretend to be down for Medicare for all? What are you going to do this time around, Kamala? This woman, I sincerely believes that this is owed to her. It's almost like she feels like the presidency was taken from her, that it was owed. That was my right. I'm supposed to be in that seat. Bathtub greens and all. And it's weird. Go away. Bye-bye. I don't understand this. I do not get it. They are still trying to make Kamala a thing. Well, we got to find a way to make this right. And, it should have been you. And let me tell you something. I found out. I just saw this before I went live. Let's see if I still have it. Here it is. Because you see, I don't have time. I don't have time for the buffoonery. And this is something all of you need to see. What I've been telling you since day one. Kamala Harris' aide suggests that the campaign was just doomed. The Harris campaign's internal polling apparently never had her ahead of Trump. Never had her ahead. What did I tell you? That is why they were going after Jill Stein. That is why Barack Obama was going after black men. She was never winning. They knew. Butch Ware was correct when he said they have known since January they couldn't win. Even after Biden dropped out and Kamala came in, they knew she couldn't win. It was all a game. All these celebrities that came out on the stage with Kamala, that was to convince you she was popular. She wasn't. You can even see it here. Listen, we were hopeful. I don't know how optimistic we were, but we thought, okay, this is tied. And if a couple of things break our way, ... We didn't get the breaks we needed on election day. I think it surprised people because there were public polls that came out in late September, early October, showing us with leads that we never saw because the leads weren't real. It was fake hype for bathtub greens. And she really is considering running again. Lost the black vote. Embarrassing. You let Biden get a larger black percentage than you. You let Hillary or Killary get larger than you. How? This is why you need to watch independent media, because I'm telling you the things that corporate media isn't going to tell you. Simone Sanders don't want to sit there and look that camera in the eye and say Kamala Harris lost the black vote. It's a damn shame, but it's the truth. Hey guys, this was a Sabby clip. If you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe.